Moscow ruling he should be detained for the next 2 months as he awaits trial. The Wall Street Journal insists he's innocent and is calling for his immediate release. The U.S. Embassy says it's seeking information from Russian authorities. Jonathan Savage, Fox News.
It appears the Georgia Supreme Court may uphold an abortion ban. AFN's Chris Woodward has more.
At issue is the Life Act, which was signed into law in Georgia in 2019. It establishes a restriction on abortion once a baby's heartbeat has been detected. Elizabeth Edmonds of Georgia Life Alliance says it also establishes personhood for the unborn child from the moment of conception.
What the opposition is trying to say is that when the Life Act was passed and signed into law originally, that it was not constitutional because Roe versus Wade had not been overturned yet. However, states do that all the time. They will pass laws that tended to be a challenge or ask a new and unique question of law or interpretation so that an appellate court can finally answer those types of questions, which is exactly what the Mississippi case did that ultimately overturned Roe versus Wade, and what the intention of the Life Act also was. So I think their argument that this was always an unconstitutional law or something like that is just, it's invalid, because the question our heartbeat law would have asked of the court is one that has never been determined to be constitutional or not.
I'm Chris Woodward.
For American Family News, I'm Robert Thornton.
American Family Studios was started back in 2011 as a way to advance the Christian worldview into an increasingly media-rich culture.
Media is like such a powerful tool to communicate the gospel. I love writing stories, getting in my office, and just thinking, how can we portray this concept of who God's character is? And to get to use the gifts that God has given me is really a joy.
AmericanFamilyStudios.net.
As Christians, we have to understand and be real with where we are.
That's what we have to see first, individually.
And where our mindset is and what we desire.
Airing the Addisons.
I think what God is really calling us back to, it's those individual personal revivals in our own lives where we're like, oh Lord, what have we done? We have minimized you.
Promoting truth, wisdom, and empowerment.
As the church, man, we should be on the forefront of making disciples, of indoctrination and godly things.
If we don't train our kids, they will not be able to stand.
Airing the Addisons.
On American Family Radio, thank you so much for listening. I'm Miki.
And I'm Will.
And Sweet Victor and J Mac are on tap to help us navigate the show. Still thinking about the way our media seems to be responding to the Nashville shooting at the Christian school, the Christians as the victims, the Christian children as the victims of this shooter, and the stories that just, like, if you can think back on the other stories where we've had mass shootings, where there are all sorts of discovery articles, who is the shooter, and there is the move to try to establish a motive and clearly identify that motive. And, historically, if there's been something like a manifesto, you may have had that posted on a social media post or something like that. And so the public had access to it, maybe even before law enforcement. I don't know. But in this case, you do have a manifesto. Law enforcement has it, but they're kind of keeping it under wraps, kind of slowly leaking parts of this manifesto, I guess the information from it, and not all of it. And you just have to wonder why, like what's going on. But I'll tell you, my concern and my thoughts are the same as they were on Tuesday, but kind of a little bit more expanded here. I believe that the left-leaning media that we are constantly at war with, it seems like, has labeled in their silence, right, and identifying why the victims were the victims. So like when you actually are, I would say, you're making a value judgment about the lives of the individuals the lives that were taken, you're making a value judgment about their lives when you fail to connect the reason for the taking of their lives, right? So you're saying that that's not really that's not important to the conversation, right? And so when you do that, and then at the same time talk about the tremendous stress and turmoil that trans-identified individuals are experiencing in this country, when you do that, what you are then, I believe, guilty of doing is identifying and then creating a bunch of soft targets in this country. So what you're doing is you're not connecting the horror of what happened to the fact that these are Christians and that this is a Christian school and that this is a targeted attack. And there's some other stories, and we'll get into that. And again, I want to be very careful because I think that over the next weeks and months that we're looking at this story, there will be more and more information that will come out. And if history repeats, as it so often does, then what you will find is you've got one story out, then, 6 weeks later, you've got another story that says, well, actually, that was not true. And here's more, accuracy on that. And I'm aware of all of that. But the problem that I'm having with what's going on is that I feel like I am reading and observing a ideologically driven media that is intentionally ignoring facts and intentionally, now they've gotten really good at not, well, let me say this. In the past here, our left-leaning media got really good at making connections for the American public. So they moved away from just reporting the facts and letting you make connections. They actually went into editorializing what they would report, right? So they would determine how you should feel and think about the pieces that they would present. But it's amazing that they have now kind of returned to just being a journalist. Like they're just reporting. Here's all the information, and they're almost kind of leaving it for you, the consumer, to make the connections, right? Like they're not making the connections here. Now they will make the connections with other stories, okay? Here are all the pieces, and then they will put them into place and sometimes stitch them together to create the narrative that they want you to have. But they're not doing that in this particular case. And the thing that to me is most troubling about this is that I believe that what they are doing, and I want to be generous, and I want to say what they are inadvertently doing, but that's not how I really feel. I actually kind of feel like it's very intentional that they are disregarding the and it's just a factual use of the term here, not connected to our current love of it, but they are intentionally disregarding the deceased's identities. Like they're Christians. This was a Christian school. And you've got a trans-identified shooter who goes in, who has a reason for going in. And we get right up to outright stating the reason, even on the part of the law enforcement officials in Nashville. You get right up to the line of stating the reason, but then the mouse just kind of runs right back into the hole. You know what I mean? It's like just a kind of a peeking out of the head. It's like, yeah, there's a manifesto, and yes, this was a targeted attack. We do believe this may have something to do with the way the shooter identified, but we're not ready to say that yet.
Right.
Okay.
I'll just say this. I think the way that they have painted just the whole agenda as far as transgenderism and all that kind of stuff, I feel like, yes, it's intentional that they're doing with how they're framing everything, but I think they have no other choice. Like they cannot say certain things.
Yeah, they will not. That's right.
They will not, because they already have painted themselves in this, this place.
They're the champions of the victims.
Exactly, and the victims being, the transgender community or whatever.
Yes.
So they it's almost like, yes, I believe, it being Christians who are killed is like, they can't even say that, and they intentionally are not saying that. But I think they've put so much in this basket that they won't go against what they've been saying all along.
Let me give you an example. Here's what they've been doing. Here's an article from ABC News. Right now, let's just read it. Let's just be casual readers of the news, and let's just assume that this is classic journalism where they are right. Okay, so here's the article. Who was Nashville shooter Audrey Hale? So what's interesting right off the bat. Okay, so guys, and I want you to think critically. And remember the time that we're living in, and remember how so many of us have been conditioned to operate. So the very first thing that gives away the fact that this article has a vested interest in protecting a particular ideology is its headline. It's the title of the article, which right out of the chute dead names the person. The person, the shooter, yes, was Audrey Hale, but the person called herself Aiden. Okay. The person actually had a different name. You remember, you guys, come on now. You're mature individuals and you're old enough to remember when we couldn't do that. That could get you kicked off Twitter, dead naming people.
Right.
That could get you kicked off the social media platforms because you were not, respecting that person's wishes. And the chief function and the chief way we operate in this country is to lead with people's identities as they present them. And so right off the bat, ABC News is saying, hey, we're not doing that here because that would draw too much attention to what we're trying to ignore.
Right.
Okay. And I'm going to keep leaning in. I know people, look, they get upset and they're all like, but here, and here's what I want to do. Because if we're having a conversation about mental illness and emotional instability, this is directly connected to how this person identified. We actually have the statistical data that points to the overwhelming suicide ideation and the emotional distress and the depressive manifestations that are present in those who identify as members of the LGBTQ plus community. That's not even a question, right? So if we want to have that conversation, you could easily, as a journalist, connect that to the story, but you refuse to. Because if you connect that to the story, then you've actually got to cover the fact that this is a transgender individual, a person who identified as trans, and you've got a vested interest in making sure that that person remains the victim. So how do you do that? Because you can't. Now you've got a lot of people. I would say an alarming amount of people who are actually trying to perspective take and trying to see from this shooter's perspective. Which is just
and when have they ever done that? Like,
oh my goodness!
I mean,
Can you imagine? Like, I'm not saying that this was right, but what I am saying is that when people have been victimized and when people have been I'm sorry. Wait, what? Right? So you've got a lot of that happening at an alarming rate for me, even just one. But you've got multiple people who feel emboldened to say this. But the troubling thing is that you've got mainstream media outlets, while not decrying those people's positions, because they go to Twitter as a source, by the way. So they won't go to Twitter as a source to decry these people's positions. They all of a sudden become fringe. Those people who are perspective taking, they become fringe, right? But they will go to Twitter for sources on other things. And those Twitter users become like legitimate sources that they can then use to make their case. So not only are they doing that, not only are they ignoring the perspective takers, but they themselves are not attributing the reason that these people were murdered to their murders. Like they are not saying, and this was the reason. And why aren't they doing that? Because if they attribute the reason, if they legitimately identify why these people were murdered, then they've got to say that Christians, because of their religious beliefs, because of their doctrine, were attacked in this country and literally lost their lives. And they are not showing up for that. No, we're not. They're not going to do that. Wow. So back to this ABC News story. Okay. I mean, and I'm just saying, guys, if we keep it 100, like if we just talk about these things, like we've been conditioned to talk about them, if we just keep with the narrative that they assign to all of us in this country, here are your talking points, then there are just some conversations that should arise. Who was the shooter? Right. If this shooter was a Christian identifying white supremacist,
Yeah.
QAnon. You think they would? You think they would be like trying to keep all of this? We don't know.
No
We can't
way.
say. We don't have enough information. You don't have enough information. She left a manifesto. You don't have enough information. You don't want to say right now. Okay, so here's ABC News, guys. Look, what I'm saying is I'm trying to encourage mental strength here. I'm trying to encourage the type of boldness that will be required for you to keep telling the truth. Like, you may not like it that in this particular case, the shooter, whether the mental disturbance was based solely on trans identification, you cannot ignore that there was trans identification.
Right.
Like, I mean, we can't talk about that. All right, so back to this ABC News article, because they're going to do, this is the expose. Who was the Nashville shooter? Audrey Hale. First out of the gate, we already know. Okay, so since you Audrey Haled this, and I'm going to make that a verb. Since you Audrey Haled this, all of a sudden, you get to dead name. Why? Because you're protecting a narrative. Okay, so it is bogus. It is bogus to me, but I refuse to be, whatever. Here we go. The shooter who attacked students and teachers at the Covenant School in Nashville, the Covenant Christian School, the private Christian school, okay, in Nashville, Tennessee on Monday was identified by police as 28-year-old Audrey Hale, who law enforcement said once attended the school. So basically, this is just like a disgruntled, like, former school kid from 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
20 years ago. She just carried that around like a ticking time bomb. Okay, who goes back to her school, and we don't really know. I mean, it's Covenant School. You can make all the guesses that you want about what covenant means and if it's connected to Christianity or not. Yeah, we don't know. A website that appears to be associated with Hale indicates that Hale was a Nashville-based graphic designer and illustrator who created logos and branding to, quote, help tell a company's story and bring a whimsical and lighthearted feel. Wow, you went to like her LinkedIn kind of information before you got to the big, like, all right, we got to grab the break. We'll be right back.
This is Don Shank with today's global update from the Tide Ministry, sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ worldwide in the languages people were born to speak. The Tide Ministry is very excited to announce our second annual Race to Share the Gospel. This virtual event invites participants to run, walk, or bike 13 miles between April 29th and May 14th to bring awareness to the work we're doing to tell people in the Middle East the truth about Jesus. Participants will virtually navigate through the streets of a city in Yemen and pray for those who haven't yet heard the good news of Christ. It is critical that we entreat God to help us extend our media outreach into Yemen and ask Him to open the hearts of people in this region of the world where 99% of the country is not Christian. That's the primary purpose of this year's Race to Share the Gospel. To learn how you can be a virtual kingdom presence among lost souls in a faraway country through the Tide Race to Share the Gospel, visit thetide.org/race. That's thetide.org/race.
What if your parents abandon you? This is Bible League International. In the Philippines, 3-year-old Casey was left in an orphanage by her own parents. She never saw her mother again. But enter the hope of the gospel in Grandma Nitz, who pointed Casey to Christ. Today at 18, Casey is teaching orphans to know and love Jesus, and they need Bibles in Asia. You can send one for only $5. $60 sends 12, every gift matched. Call 800-YES-WORD, 800-YES-WORD, or sendbiblesnow.org. Sendbiblesnow.org. This is Bible League International. Many women in the Middle East are treated as less valuable, forced to marry young, and denied an education, meaning that many cannot read or write. So Bible League is giving them the gift of literacy and dignity and showing them God's great love. Magda was asked by her husband to skip these literacy classes, but she endured and something beautiful came about. Learn what she did to win her extremist husband over. Hear it all now. It's only 15 minutes and free of charge at BibleLeague.org/podcast. BibleLeague.org/podcast.
A Moment of Truth with Gary Bryden, Executive Director of the Association of Independent Methodists.
Dr. Gary Cockrell, a good friend of 33 years and a recently retired professor at Wesley Biblical Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi, shared some important truths of the Christian faith. He said, Jesus is not at my beck and call, I am at His. He also said, if you follow a crucified Lord, you too will have to be crucified. Jesus said something similar when He said, he that does not take up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He that finds his life shall lose it, and he that loses his life for my sake shall find it. Many around the world today already know these truths by experience. The rest of us need to.
The Association of Independent Methodists, like-minded congregations doing together what can't be done separately. Visit aim2020.com.
Feel thorns where my crown was. I'll be weak, but I'm alive from the dust until dawn. Yeah, I'll survive, 'cause I got sweet victory. Nobody can take it from me. Sweet victory, 'cause I got sweet victory.
Welcome back to Aaron the Addisons on American Family Radio. I'm Miki.
And I'm Will, and that's Triple E, Sweet Victory.
So today we're discussing my opinion that the media is identifying soft targets for radical ideologues and the emotionally and mentally unwell. And they are doing this in very, sleek, smooth fashion, but we should be wise and discerning enough to see what they are doing when they refuse to consistently connect what happened at Covenant, this private Christian school, when they refuse to connect what happened to the fact that these victims were Christians, and there was a detailed plan. Like when they refuse to do that, what they are actually doing is devaluing the identity of these victims. They are saying that's not really important. And let me tell you why they want to disconnect this particular identity, if you will, from the victims. Because if they do that, then by their own standards, their own media practice, then what they would have to do is they would have to call it a hate crime. And they can't do that because the one who perpetrated the hate is the one who they have decided is hated.
Right. They're the victim.
So the victim can never, you have to understand, guys, this is critical theory. All right. This is cultural Marxism. This is neo-Marxism. The victim can never, ever be the victimizer. The oppressed can never, ever be the oppressor. But it's interesting. I mean, they are doing an amazing gymnastics routine here in all of their writing. I mean, it's like the floor routine. Oh, wait, and back and back. Oh, and sticking it. They are nailing it. Right. I mean, it's an amazing sort of like routine that they have choreographed, because while still trying to protect this particular community, right, they find themselves having to violate their own standards. So here's how ABC, getting back to their article, here's how ABC kind of gets around trying to look like they're doing journalism. Like they get around it, like trying to, they just enough that you go, oh, we'll see, they did say something, but here's what man, I'm sorry. Here's what and it's not funny. You know what I mean? But it's like, to me, comical that they fall all over themselves and look like what we suspect all along. All right. So they go to the LinkedIn, and I'm just using that sort of as a generic, they list what she does for a living or did for a living. Okay. And then ABC News, this is how they get to the whole identity thing. While not actually being the ones to cover it. Here's what they say. A police spokesperson told ABC News, I heard from Sally who heard from Bill, because Bob had said that she was transgender, but now we not saying that.
Man.
I heard from Kathy who heard from Sam, who told Bill. Guys, these are journalists, okay? So
you're supposed to
like
have
New Orleans, this is what this looks like. A police spokesperson had told ABC News, okay, where's cover the story.
Right.
Why don't you have enough
digging,
information? Don't you guys have the journalists who can find this information for yourselves? Why is it that if anybody comes back to retaliate, it's the law enforcement officer who had said it?
Where's the crack research team?
Do you understand? What is going on? Guys, and you don't, and I don't want to minimize
that's right.
Do you see what I'm talking about here, though?
Yeah.
But we're supposed to be the crazy ones because we point it out.
And any other topic, they'll be like, we have identified, or
he identified as a Christian nationalist.
Right.
They
it would be
say
no soup mouth about it. It'll be like, this is what it is.
Come on. It would not be, and according to
Right.
It is believed that. No, it would be he identified as a Christian nationalist. He believed that he was going to bring a one world government. All of that stuff. They would cover that stuff as if they had access to his journals.
So true.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
True. Yeah.
So, but here we are in this two-step that they're doing. Okay, it's the Dominique Dawes of journalism. All right, this is a floor routine. Okay, a police spokesperson told ABC News that Hale was assigned female at birth and pointed to a social media account linked to Hale that included use of the pronouns he, him. Police said that Hale...
Not us. Police said. Those people, the police, the other people that you don't like.
But can I say this though? Can I say this though? Can I say this? After they do this, they continue to use female pronouns for her. They continue to go through using. So it's
because
like,
police said, like, we didn't find this out on our own. So we're gonna, police said this.
So, but where is the exaltation of the self? Like, if you guys have any intel, okay, on how a person identifies, that's enough. That's all you need. You turn into Aaron Neville's. I don't know much, and it's all I need to know.
Oh,
I'm sorry, but that's what we're dealing with, and I refuse to let these people make me think that I'm crazy.
Right.
I refuse because I read your articles for all of these other events, and I read how you cover them. I read how you discuss the attackers, and I read how you discuss the victims. You actually let them be victims. You when for the other stories that you cover, you actually let the victims be victims. You actually identify why they were targeted. And then you present to the American public that we should care, that this is why they were targeted. But in this particular case, you're saying to the American people, we don't really, she was also maybe going to go to a mall, and there were also other targets. And it appears to be, even though she marked out where she was going to go and how she was going to, carry out, it seems to be a little bit kind of somewhat random. And so what you are saying to people is that it doesn't matter that these people were Christians. That's not enough to secure for you victim status in this country. And at the same time that you have this happening, you've got trans-identified activists who are planning a day of vengeance at the Supreme Court on Saturday. They are planning a rally that they are calling a day of vengeance. So I was reading this article, and I just want to go back to it. This is a Christian Post article. An LGBT advocacy group still plans to hold a trans day of vengeance this weekend, even though it's drawing criticism in light of the mass shooting Monday at a Nashville Christian school. Well, there you go. That's some reporting. At a Nashville Christian school perpetrated by a trans-identified biological female. That's actual reporting right there.
The Christian Post.
Do you see that? That's. I just want to say this is Ryan Foley, okay, reporting for the Christian Post. Good. God bless you, Ryan. That's actual reporting there. They're giving you all of the information. They're telling you why this is a story.
Yeah.
Do you understand? They're telling you why this is something that, you should kind of pique your curiosity. Like, wait a minute. The trans-identified activists are holding a Day of Vengeance rally. And I'm going to get into some of the tweets that were removed by Twitter, like over 5,000 tweets removed. And Twitter is saying, well, vast majority of those tweets were retweeted by conservatives, warning other people.
So, but the thing is, just change that to white supremacist group is holding a Day of Vengeance rally. Like,
when in the wake of it, it had been a trans nightclub shot up by a man who was a Christian. And then just days later, the Christians are holding a Day of Vengeance rally.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Where? Not in this country. No, not in this country. It would not happen. Right? But here we have the Trans Radical Activist Network. They are planning a Trans Day of Vengeance. Now, this is really interesting, and I want to talk, and you always want to try to consult a dictionary when people tell you that you're stupid. When people tell you that you're stupid, you just want to consult a dictionary because you think that you know the definitions of words, but when you learn that you are an idiot and you don't, So what you do then is you
Right.
consult a dictionary, and that is what I have done.
Okay.
Because I thought I knew the definition of vengeance.
Right. Yeah.
Turns out I didn't.
Okay,
I didn't
okay.
know the definition
Well,
of vengeance.
I didn't
Okay.
know either.
So here we go. Here is the story. Okay. The Trans Radical Activist Network released a statement on Tuesday indicating that its Trans Day of Vengeance, scheduled to take place in front of the U.S. Supreme Court on Saturday, will move forward as planned. The event will occur just 5 days after Audrey Hale, a 28-year-old female who identified as male, opened fire at the Covenant School in Nashville, killing 3 children and 3 adults before being killed by police. The event was planned before the shooting, and the group stressed that it was, quote, horrified at the acts of violence committed at the Covenant School. Quote, we are outraged by this tragedy. We grieve, and then they list all of the victims here. The organization lists all the victims. They say, we also reject any connection between the horrific event and ours. We reject any connection between the horrific event and ours. But you're supposed to be a sensitive group, though.
Right.
You're supposed to be the ones who are the sensing among us, who are in touch with your feelings. So there's a part in this where I feel like you should say, you know, we reject any connections to this event, and maybe we cancel ours. Maybe we don't want, but unless of course, this is what you're calling for. Because as you're going to continue to hear today, all of the paraphernalia, if you will, associated with this activist organization is militant. It's militant. So you've got these automatic weapons that you're saying on your T-shirts, the Trans Day of Vengeance. But it's not real vengeance. So this is what the group said. The group said that vengeance means fighting back with vehemence. Now, vehemence and vengeance both start with the letter V. That's the letter of the day. They both start with the letter V. But we're not that stupid. Okay? We don't confuse vehemence, strongly positioning or strongly responding to something. We don't confuse that with vengeance because we can consult a dictionary, just like you did. Just like you did, right? So it's interesting. They're holding this day of vengeance, and it's moving forward. All right. They've got weapons associated with all of their promos. Okay. This is what they have in their mind. They're saying in all of their promotions and all of their materials that it's not enough for them to be seen.
Wow.
That's what, so
they have weapons in their promotion?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
So
yes.
I don't want to hear nothing about January 6th.
Links.
No more. Don't
Thank
tell me,
you.
Don't tell me nothing about that, please.
Links will be in the show notes. You got to read it for yourself. You got to see it for yourself. The Daily Mail, they don't care. The Daily Mail over in the UK, they don't care. They have all all the marbles right there. They have all of the information. Our media will not disclose that, but the Daily Mail, they don't care. If it gets you to click on it, they will share it with you because they want you on their website. But just let me define vengeance. Okay, so because I was, I was public schooled, and so I realized that maybe my books were not sufficient. Vengeance, punishment inflicted or retribution exacted for an injury or wrong. That's
Did you
not
say
vehemence.
punishment inflicted?
Yep, I sure did.
Like,
I
what
sure
would that
did.
punishment be?
Well, it could be taking out those who you see as doing great violence to you because ideologically, or maybe in the Christian's case, doctrinally, they disagree with you. You see here, this is what we have done in this country. Now, guys, I want you to think about this. This is what we began to do. And then a lot of Christians allowed it. Okay. A lot of Christians echoed it. So you intensified it because you thought you were doing the Christian thing. Let me just tell you, and then I'll move on. The Christian thing is to always tell the truth.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
So for the people who are just always sort of like, well, we want to have a good, solid Christian response. Tell the truth. That's the Christian response. The Christian response is to tell the truth. And guess what? Truth and love are not mutually exclusive. They are not in opposition to one another. Scripture tells us very plainly that we are to speak the truth in love. To tell the truth is to love. But here's what we did. We normalized sentiment and ideas. We normalized ideologies. We normalized politics as being actual violence against people.
Yeah.
We normalized that. When people started using words like your words are violence,
Right. Right.
then what we did was we started to change our words. And so when we started to change our words, when they said you're dead naming me is violence, or they said you're misgendering me is violence, what we did was we chose to use the person's preferred pronouns and we chose to use the person's new name, right? And what we were saying was we don't want to do violence against you. We don't want to do violence against you. So we will comply. And so then what we did was once we complied, then we empowered the people who said, yes, you see, you recognize that was violence. So now they feel empowered to say, oh, we're not going to take this violence anymore. For those who are still the holdouts, for those who would still dead name us, for those who would seek to protect children who don't understand the irreversible consequences of what is being passed around like candy, for those states that would seek to protect confused youth, that's violence. So they're saying we're not going to take that anymore. So they feel emboldened to hold a rally calling it the Trans Day of Vengeance. And while all of this is happening, please also know that the mainstream media is not identifying that the 6 people who were murdered in Nashville were murdered because they were Christians. They were murdered because of their doctrine. They were murdered because of their theology. And so what does this do? This emboldens the radicals. And so what I am saying is that the mainstream media is not only creating, if you will, but identifying, pointing out soft targets all across this country, even justifying preemptively those who would go in to, defend themselves because words and ideologies, doctrine, that's violence. We'll be right back.
The AFA Resource Center has all your favorite items. Everything from books, movies, shirts, and even hats. Introducing AFA's polyester and twill hats, starting at just $18. Whether you're into fashion, a collector, or you're just having a bad hair day, these hats are just what you need. You can buy one for yourself or a friend. Purchase your AFA hat today at resources.afa.net.
What does the American Family Association stand for?
We believe true morality flows from biblical principles and directs people to the manner in which God intends them to live.
These values and more are part of our mission to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of our culture. We also support the church. We want to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training for cultural transformation. Thank you for standing with us as we seek to stop the erosion of godly values.
In His image, delighting in God's plan for gender and sexuality is changing hearts and lives.
It speaks directly to the power and the grace of God.
Gives me hope for people that I know that are struggling.
The whole idea of In His image has moved me.
We actually had one gentleman contact us, and he said that this film changed his mind about this issue. We had a pastor reach out to us, and he said that he'd been struggling with hatred in his heart towards people in the LGBTQ community, and this film helped him to realize he needed to have compassion and show people the love of Christ. We also had this same-sex attracted couple contact us, and they said after seeing the film, they wanted to live obedient lives for Christ no matter what. And they said, please pray for us. We know this is going to be hard. We've even had people come to faith in Jesus through In His Image.
To find out more, visit inhisimage.movie.
Let's be real, retirement is expensive, and inflation is making it even harder with the cost of everything going up from pet food to a dozen eggs. Wouldn't it be great if the cost of your health care could go down? Well, Medishare 65 Plus is $99 a month for ages 65 to 74. And for many with Medicare Parts A and B looking at other options, that's 50% or more saved per month. No gimmicks. It's $99 a month, and you can use any Medicare-approved doctor or facility, and you get 24/7 access to telehealth from the convenience of your home. Better yet, Medishare is a Christian nonprofit organization. It's a community that'll pray for you and encourage you. And since we've cut out the middleman, you get to keep the savings. Call now. You can learn more about Medishare 65 Plus. Here's the number, 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE, 833-45-BIBLE.
I'll set my crown at your feet and rejoice.
Welcome back to Aaron the Addisons on American Family Radio. The Daily Mail making this not only about the shooter being the victim of sorts, but it's really interesting because the Daily Mail makes the parents kind of responsible for what Audrey Hale did. And not only because they're Christian, but because they're wealthy. And I'm going to show you how they did that, right? So it's you can't make it up. You can't make it up. But here's the headline. Exclusive. Nashville mass shooter Audrey Hale was rejected by her Christian parents who couldn't accept she was gay and trans. As cops reveal, she also planned to shoot relatives. Twisted school shooter Audrey Hale was at odds with her devout Christian parents because they couldn't accept she was gay and transgender, DailyMail.com can exclusively reveal. Church coordinator Norma, 61, and her husband Ronald, 64, refused to let Hale, who had recently adopted the name Aiden and used he/him pronouns, dress as a man in their home. The 28-year-old loner would instead wait until she left their $700,000 Nashville property. What does that have to do? I'm sorry, like, what does that have to do? What does the value of the shooter's parents' home have to do with this story? Except that they are both Christian and $700,000 and wealthy. So oppressor. Like, I mean, it's not even a question. But look, let me tell you, here's the thing that's really really concerning to me about this. What's really concerning to me about this is that when you look at these stories sort of as one-off stories, you could be tempted to, and many people probably are, just dismissing them as like, well, there's the media. But what I'm doing is I'm actually looking at these stories and I'm actually kind of like collecting them mentally, if you will. Like I'm kind of putting them together, and I'm getting this sketch here that what is really happening in this country is that Christians are being told without question, you don't have to wonder anymore, that, you know, you really don't matter. Like if you are a victim as a Christian, all right, we're not going to call that a hate crime, right, even if the shooter says what his or her motivation actually was.
Right.
Like we're not going to validate you in that way.
Right. And look, you can even just think about the things that we represent as Christians. So we study the Bible, and the things that are in the Bible are against what the world is saying and doing. You know, they could even look at politics and say, well, 81% of evangelicals voted for. So that's another. So they on their end, they're like, no, we hate those people. So hey, why would we say, they can't be victims? It's crazy.
So the thing that's really concerning here is I was reading an article, I think it was a New York Times article, because I was wondering about the number of private Christian schools, how many private Christian schools there are in this country. And this number is grown, certainly. According to government stats, this is from 2020, and we know that post-pandemic, private Christian education in particular skyrocketed. Private education did go up, but private Christian education skyrocketed because of the Zoom reveals, because of parents learning all that was going on inside their kids' schools, and they felt like their kids were not safe in that environment. They removed them, some of them bringing them home to homeschool them, others of them relocating them to private Christian schools. So this number is probably higher. But as of 2020, according to government stats, there were over 32,000 private schools in this nation with over 5.7 million students attending these schools. Of these 32,000 private schools, 84% are religious schools. So then the New York Times had an article out in 2021 looking at the Christian school boom, and that it was a revolt against curricula and pandemic rules. So maybe a combination of all of those, but really I think it points back to parents saying we have the right to be parents.
Right.
And we're going to continue to secure that right. But here's the bigger picture. Here's the reason that I'm bringing all of that up. I believe that in the way the media is operating, that the media is creating all sorts of soft targets all across this country, because what they are saying is that, you know what, these people don't really deserve to be protected. The person who really deserves to be protected is the one who went in and shot up the school. And why? Because that person is a part of our protected class. Guys, this is why understanding critical theory and all of its offshoots becomes so important.
And they flip it because they say this person is the victim because those Christians are the one that drove this person to do this.
Exactly.
So they are the wicked. Like, who was that said that years ago? The Christians are.
Tim Gill. Tim Gill going to punish the wicked.
Punish the wicked. So the Christians become the wicked because y'all drove her to this.
You know, I'll open the phone lines, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. You can comment on what we're talking about today, 888-589-8840. I find it really interesting that when we're talking about this Trans Day of Vengeance that is slated to take place on Saturday, you've got one of the most vocal trans militant activists, which is I think creates a problem. It's interesting. I think this creates a problem for those who at the same time want to curtail gun ownership in this country, but the trans people now are saying they need to take self-defense classes and they need to learn how do you reconcile those things? Yeah. It's interesting that the trans people can feel justified in wanting to defend and protect themselves and maybe even use a weapon, right? Like because we are under attack in this country, and you can have the mainstream media validating those claims that trans people are under attack in this country. Now, what they're talking about is they're talking about legislation all across this country moving to protect children. That's what they're talking about. But the way they describe it is that the trans people and the drag queens are under like physical, literal attack. That's the way they cover the story. It's what it would make you think is actually happening. That's not what's actually happening. But that's the way they would make you think, right? And so they have a problem, though, because now the trans activists are saying, hey, you know what? We have guns. We have guns. Maybe we're not going to continue to be victims, and we're tired of just saying that we want to be seen. What does that mean? Like, if you say we're tired of just saying we want to be seen, okay, but what are you saying when you say that?
Right.
And so how does the media then spin that? I don't know what they'll do with that.
Right.
Because it's amazing that you've got even the radical liberals making the connection of, like, if I feel like I'm a victim, if I feel like that it's possible for me to come under physical attack, then I have the right to defend myself. It's like they all of a sudden become like these constitutionalists. I have the right to defend myself. I have the right to bear arms. So we're putting together this day of vengeance. Can you imagine if they were not trans-identified? Can you imagine? And so all of the Christians are supposed to feel like, they're keep quiet. Shh, don't say anything. Shh. All right, let's go to the phone lines. Will the Great, where do we go first?
All right, let's see here. Let's go to James in Alabama. Hi, James.
Hey, how you doing, Will?
Doing good.
Okay, listen, you are a great communicator, okay? I want to tell you that.
Well, thank you.
First of all, it's sad when it's sad when we can't put our kids in public school. So we take them out and put them in Christian schools. And they're still not safe. Now, Obama said he was going to fundamentally change America.
Yeah.
They've done that. Him and his vice president has done that.
Yeah.
Now, our fight is not against them. It's against the spiritual and all that, like in Put On God's Armor. And you guys will fight, but you're going to have to stand. I think we need to get every preacher that's in America and go to Washington. I don't understand why it hasn't happened. We got a lot of great preachers out here, but we're not coming together to meet. We're going to take this fight straight to Washington. If they can arm up and go to Washington, surely we can too.
Well, James, they kind of tried that, and then they started pinging people's phones and arresting people.
They can't tell us nothing though if they're gonna have a day of vengeance for the.
Oh, you're thinking it's still like the America that you knew.
Oh well,
You're being reasonable.
I'm just saying, how could they say anything if they're gonna allow,
Easily, as they always do. Back to the phone lines, 888-589-8840. Will the Great, where are we headed?
Let's go to Mary in Texas. Hi, Mary.
Good morning, and I thank you for taking my call. I was just wondering if you're aware that on Breitbart News today, I read a story where 2 months before this transgender woman did the shooting at the Christian school, a video game came out for transgenders, and it's all about taking out shooting Christians and even a priest to take out their frustration and rage with weaponry. And I don't know, people haven't seen it. I posted it on my Facebook page because I couldn't believe it. And I thought, wow, couldn't this be a lawsuit for these poor people? Hollywood has produced more violence, not the gun people, but Hollywood has, how do you do these video games put into the minds of people.
Yeah.
Mary, you're so spot on. I will tell you, I was not familiar with that story. That I will look it up, though. That's very interesting, something I'd like to read just to understand the details of that. But I think you're really onto something. And I want to say this. I want to make sure that people understand what I'm saying. I really do believe that Audrey Hale was mentally and emotionally and even spiritually tormented. And I don't hesitate to identify that even for a second. My problem and my purpose for addressing what I'm addressing today is to call out the media that I think is making potential victims all across this country and the way that they're being derelict in their duty to accurately cover what has happened. Yeah. They have presented themselves as the truth tellers in culture. They do all of the ins and outs of identifying. They can smell a hate crime a mile away as long as you meet a certain description, right? But in this particular case, the Christians don't count. And I think we have a really big problem here. And if we don't call it out, if we remain silent, then my concern is, as you watch the media validate this type of behavior because a person is in a certain protected class, right? And we know what the favored class is in this country. I'm concerned about what will continue to happen and even intensify down the line. Let's go back to the phone lines, 888-589-8840. Will agree.
Let's go to Joshua in Virginia. Hi, Joshua.
Thank you so much for taking my call, brother and sisters. Thank you so much. Let me just say that, yes, media is definitely tearing us all up and everything, but I want to encourage everybody today, and I just want to say that first and foremost, we wrestle not with flesh, but we wrestle against, of course, we wrestle against the wickedness in high places, principality, rulers of this age. And I want to say to everybody hearing my voice right now that's a follower of Jesus Christ, you have been given power and authority over spirits. You've been given power and authority to drive out demons. You've been given power and authority to preach the gospel and to lovingly make and bring disciples into the kingdom. And it's our responsibility to find out what's going on, see these people who are tormented, preach the gospel so they would receive it, and then get rid of that torment by the power and authority given unto us. We can destroy this. We can get rid of it through him, the Holy Spirit in us. It's our fight. It's our duty. The kingdom of light must come, and we are the ones who are going to bring it. So let us do it, and let us do it with boldness and with love and with faith. And I just want to say this is a big thing that's happened in this country. The spiritual awareness is coming forth, and if you want to get involved in it, look into deliverance. You have that power and authority. There's movies out there, Come Out in Jesus' Name. It's out there, and we're getting into it, and we're seeing people get set free. So we need everybody to be on board in the name of Jesus. Thank you.
Joshua,
Joshua.
Look, I want to say thank you so much for your call. I appreciate what you said. I'm not familiar with the movie that you're talking about. I haven't seen anything from that, so I can't vouch for that.
Yeah.
But I will say that your initial comments came straight from Scripture.
Amen.
Like understanding what we are up against in this country is not a luxury, right? It's not something like, oh, if I have time, then I'll become more discerning, or I'll read and I will investigate or whatever. No, this is a mandate, right? We have to understand what is going on around us. We have to engage effectively. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is to recognize that there is a battle in a realm that is unseen to us, but it is as real as what we see. Our brother Joshua is exactly spot on. We call you on a regular basis to be reading your Bible, engaging with your scriptures, knowing the truth contained therein, and then living it. Here's the bottom line. The media that we thought would tell the truth it's been proven time and time again that they will not. Oh, no. They will not. So you can't rely on them to tell the truth or to paint the accurate picture that you expect to be painted.
Right.
All right. We're out of time. Until tomorrow, Lord willing.
God bless.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American